Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am very excited to have the next guy on the show, Marlon Marrache. I just like saying his last name, Marrache. He's a buddy of mine, former LAPD, but still in the game in a different law enforcement capacity. He is an expert on use of force and other critical incidents that law enforcement officers get into, and he's on the show. Welcome, brother.
Fitz, my man, my dude, my guy. No one's called you Fitz since
I know, man.
In the military.
Well, in law enforcement, you know, they used to call me Fitz all the time because
right?
we know cops can't read and they can't read the nameplate. And so they were just like, Fitz. Yeah. Yeah. For the listener out there, I had the honor of meeting Marlon last year. I was out in LAPD attending, Marlon hooked it up for me, attending MHIT, which is run by LAPD. It's like their version on CIT, and it was an honor, brother. Had a good time out there. I want to talk. Oh, it was awesome, brother. Thanks to you.
Thank you.
For those of people out there who don't know you, who you are, and you're all over the place, tell us a little bit about yourself, brother. I already gave it a snippet in the intro.
You know, rather than going through a whole trip down memory lane, let's just get to like the latest.
Yeah,
right?
Let's do it, brother.
So when you and I met, I was retired. I was walking my dog to the beach. I was at the gym. My daughter was coming home from college. All the things that I was just thinking to myself, this is great, man. I get to do, you know, my thing, consult. I just took the bar exam. I'm going to become a lawyer someday. I'm going to go back and work, you know, be a police attorney, all that good stuff. And lo and behold, I totally forgot. I shouldn't say I totally forgot, but I did put in an application to Cal State Dominguez Hills, to a university, local university. And 6 months later, they decided to give me an interview. And oh gosh, that phone call, that 15 to 20-minute phone call with the sweetest lady, even though without hesitation, I did tell her, you know what? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I wish to withdraw from the process. So rather than take you to this conversation, she convinced me. I had the interview, and they offered me the job, conditional hire. And in November, I started back in uniform, back in law enforcement,
back in the mix.
In it.
But you're a lieutenant now, and you were a sergeant before, correct?
Correct. It was a promotion.
Yeah.
And that promotion comes with a lot of leadership and a lot of duties, responsibilities. What I mean by that is, the university is so small that it's just the chief and myself. I have 2 detectives, 3 sergeants, and 16 officers. And we pretty much handle a campus. We're still trying to fill 346 acres that we're starting to build.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine there's a lot of challenges ahead of us.
Yeah.
But the campus is pretty big in terms of student body. You're looking at about, most ever probably 17,000 compared to San Diego State or Fresno State, San Francisco State, or Cal State Fullerton.
But it's still a good chunk. It's a pretty good size student body.
It's a good chunk, but when you start talking about 35,000 plus, that's really big chunk. But
yes, like UCLA and all these other places.
Exactly. So one of the couple of perks and the reasons why I made this decision is, one, I get to continue to provide that leadership. To learn more, right? To grow. Absolutely. And more important than anything is soccer. You know, I'm a soccer dude. And it just so happens that the Dignity Health Sports Park is right there on that land where the Galaxy play.
So you're like, all right,
come on.
I'm going to take this job because of the soccer.
Because of the soccer. I asked my detective, hey, so who's the events coordinator here? Oh, I'm the one responsible. You know what? I'll be at the command post practically about maybe every day or every game. But with that being said, in all seriousness, great group of sergeants and officers. I get the ability to perhaps what I do teach and what I do render in terms of use of force investigations, what I've done in the past with LAPD, responding to all these critical incidents. And more important than anything is just discipline. I think any time that you can get into an agency and see the culture, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about.
Exactly.
But when you start looking into that with a very, very narrow scope, there's always room to improve and change. So I have the ability to do that. So here we are again.
Thank you, brother. You are an amazing individual, very smart. Again, I had the honor of meeting you, and you know your shit. And I wanted to talk today. Thank you for your service, brother. I wanted to talk about Memphis. I know it's all over the news. This horrible incident that we all witnessed when this body cam was released a couple of weeks ago. I know and you hit it. Everybody's talking about training and training and training. Officers are trained all the time. You know that, Marlon. But culture, can you expand on that a little bit in terms of use of force issues and what we saw with this Nichols case?
Okay, so when that Friday at 4 p.m.-ish Pacific Standard Time, when the video was released, we just happened to be still doing the supervisor seminar with Savage Training with Scott. And so one of the keynote speakers was the deputy chief, who said, look, this video is very, very damning. It doesn't look good. So stand by, right? And so when I had a chance to see it, I'm at the airport, I'm looking at it. The first thing that pops right out of my mind is, I mean, come on. We're really thinking that these 5 officers, right, it's their only first time that they actually done something like this, right?
Absolutely,
One,
yeah.
two, is it an aberration? Oh my God, this is just something that we just did this once, you know, it doesn't happen quite often. 2, training. And then all of a sudden since last Friday, so it's been about a week, right? So for this past week, all these experts, I'm on LinkedIn, I see the news, and everybody's talking about reform, and everybody wants to talk about training, reform, reform. Let's talk about all that. Only certain few kind of hit the nose in the button, which is culture. You know, I always say this phrase that culture, organizational culture, AKA COG culture, will always dictate what you do and what you don't do.
Absolutely.
And that's the honest truth. That's reality. That's unequivocal, crystal clear, that if you get into a department and you start watching your sergeant or your supervisors and your leadership do police work a certain way, chances are you're going to do it the same. Come on, let's think about it. We were both in the academy. I was explaining to my daughter just the other day, you know, she's a college freshman. I said, look, Sophia, there is no police academy in the United States that says, okay, today we're going to learn how to strike someone in the face when they're handcuffed. It doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Today we're going to learn how to OC spray everybody and not even warn anybody about OC spraying, right? That's how we're going to deploy it. And today we're going to learn about each and every specific application of force that happened in Memphis. So the best way that I can describe it, that just comes natural, it's just culture, man. That's what this is all about. There's no way you're going to sit here and tell me that the sergeant didn't know about the Scorpion unit. The sergeant didn't know how they conduct, you know,
or the chief
functions, right?
The chief.
Right. I just started at this level.
Yeah.
The sergeant doesn't know. The lieutenant doesn't know. The captain doesn't know. And the chief doesn't know. So you're going to tell me out of all those levels of leadership, management, command staff, they didn't know that this is kind of like what you guys do. By the way, they're a specialized unit. So I'm sure they're very mission specific. So
you have a special
in Memphis, in the city of Memphis, you see these guys. I shouldn't say guys, but you see these cops, chances are you're probably going to be like, oh shit, you know? So anyways, it's COG culture.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
And you know, with specialized units, there needs to be very good grip on command and control. Where was the supervisor? And we've heard this, but where was the supervisor on that call? You know, where was it? I mean, you got 5 guys there beating the hell out of this guy, and not one of them could get a arm around his back, put a handcuff on. You know, once you get that first handcuff on, chances are you're going to get the other arm, right? Because now you can manipulate that one arm with the handcuff on.
I don't mean to smile, I don't mean to sound humorous, but you know what? Every time when I was a field sergeant, I was out there, the first thing I tell my guys is like, look, you're in the business of, at times, you're going to put hands on someone. And here's the deal. When you put hands on someone, you need to effect that arrest ASAP, as quick as possible, as safely as possible, code 4 in custody. Because we don't want to be rolling around trying to figure out how to, specific maneuvers or putting the hands behind your back and so on and so forth. I mean, these dudes struggle. And the saddest part about that particular incident is when they did approach, when they did come into contact, somehow, some way, the dude just takes off. No control whatsoever.
How the hell does that happen?
He safe off running. So then what happens is, and the emotions just, and the rage and the frustration is like, the ego starts kicking in and saying, you know what, no way. And then here we are, half mile away from his house, and the rest is history. You saw that. So there's a lot of dynamics involved. But what it comes down to more than anything is to have a full body discussion about the culture of Memphis PD. And if it wasn't addressed in the past, it should be addressed now. Unfortunately, we have to address things in a reactionary mode. That's not the point.
Yeah.
Had you and I would have been sergeants in Memphis PD, I'd be the first one to tell you, there's no way. We're going, someone's got to tell me that these guys do traffic stops or to do this and that. You better believe I'm going to be, what do they call it? Quality control. I'm going to be out there making sure you're actually doing good police work. And when you're actually making constitutional traffic stops, when you're doing consensual encounters legally, when you're responding to service calls and you're providing really good service to represent the city of Memphis as best as possible as a community member, because that's what you expect, then that's what we're going to do. But if you're not doing any of that, you can call it what you want. Call it micromanagement, management, I should say. Call it, the sergeant's helicoptering me. Yes, I am.
With a specialized unit like that, you need to have that control.
Yeah. And what I do remember, and I do recall in my LAPD days, part of the consent decree is that when you do join in gang enforcement detail as an officer or a sergeant, number one, you got to fill out a financial disclosure. That was a big deal. Number two, I believe that not so much search warrants, but any traffic stops or any type of initiated police function, a sergeant has to be present.
Yeah. And I know the Memphis police chief came out a couple days before the body cam was released. But I think the police chief has to go. I know people are going to get pissed off at that, and it's not a color thing. It all ends on the desk of the chief of police, no matter who it's in there. Absolutely. How this chief of police is going to be able to survive this is beyond me, because, and you and I talked about it's systemic throughout the agency. To your point, this isn't the first time that these 5 cops did this kind of crap. It was the first time they got caught. You can't tell me other officers in the agency don't think the same way these guys do.
Right.
This is learned behavior. It's
right.
Learned behavior. It's like kids, they copy what they fucking see.
Yeah. And there's probably patrol officers in Memphis who are like, you know what? I don't want to deal with those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to have nothing to do with any of the traffic stops. I'm not even going to respond or even back them. Right. And so the question is, so what happens to them? They bring these issues or these concerns. It's not even issues, but these concerns in a very professional, respectful way to a supervisor. And then what happens? So you're right. It relies on first line of supervision, but I'd have to agree with you. I don't think that she's going to survive all this.
Well, it's vicarious. It's vicarious liability, brother. You know that.
Correct. Lessons learned, obviously, from the past. She did terminate them, and she did, have that consultation with the criminal process with the district attorney's office, and they did what they had to do and charge them with murder. Which, by the way, it's happening more often than not lately, where cops. I always thought that, at some point in an OIS or whatever, a controversial, use of force where it's very excessive, or even an OIS, I did see when I did retire almost a year ago where cops are going to get criminally filed on. Never did I ever think that they would be murder. I still don't think first degree will ever reach that point.
We got to prove intent with that. These five cops.
And from what I learned in law school from criminal law is that they always used to tell you, hey, if it's not first degree, it's second. And obviously the degrees are statutory. So not knowing the statute of Tennessee, that's pretty serious. So that in it itself, those two things that she did, terminate them. And
I think that's great. Obviously, I mean,
that's great.
How can you argue with the body cam? I mean,
that's what the community.
Yeah.
And by the way, we've only seen one body worn. My understanding is there's a couple. Or
there's a couple more out there.
On, yeah, right. Yeah. Or some weren't even turned on.
And I think they brought charges. I just read the sixth guy. Who it was the taser.
Who showed up and just joined the party and taser.
Yeah, taser.
Okay, so you ever know what the policy of a taser is? You know, the deployment, you see what I'm saying? I mean, I know it sounds kind of elementary and fun, humorous to say that this kind of stuff they don't teach you. So why is everybody talking about training? You can't root for training when you have a handcuffed suspect standing up and you're punching the suspect. That's not training. Let's just get that out of the way.
That's a good point. That's culture.
Exactly. Tell me one academy instructor in the United States that says, okay, class, today, this is what we're going to teach you.
Yeah, get up in your handcuffs and we're going to beat you up.
Exactly. This is what we're going to do. Now, if someone's on the ground and you get pissed off because your partner sprayed everybody and you come back and actually kick them right in the face, we're going to teach you that too. So again, let's be clear. It has nothing to do with training. It has everything to do with culture. And that is important to get everybody. So it's interesting, I had a partner of mine. So how do you quantify that? How do you measure? Is there any meta-analysis? Is there any way to measure culture? And the short answer to that is, me personally, I don't think so. Besides the fact that you have to be very honest, have a lot of integrity, and get into this profession with, that type of attitude this is just not going to happen, Now,
go ahead.
Let me ask you this. I know a lot of people have been talking about hiring. What you're thinking about hiring? Because there's this little element about, they went through a speedy process and they lowered the standards.
I think that's a great question. I've been asked this before too. Look, my personal belief is I would rather go short on the street and be short strength-wise on the street. And I don't know these guys' background. I don't know it, but I heard the same thing, that they sped through an application process because they were in need of cops. I get that. Mm-hmm. But my personal belief is we shouldn't cut corners. And I don't know anything about these guys, but if that's what happened, again, I would rather go short-staffed. And I know that sucks for cops on the street than to have somebody there who, because this is the kind of shit you get. I understand that we're short on the street. I get that. But the minute you start lowering standards because you're trying to fill bodies on the street, it's a recipe for disaster, and it's not going to work out. And who knows? I don't know, Marlon, about these guys' background. I heard the same thing.
And I was asked that too. I had a little debate with one of my colleagues about it as well. Look, I'm going to preface by saying that, number one, I've never worked backgrounds. I don't know much about the process of what's considered to be lower standards or not. But the first thing that pops in my mind is, okay, so are we saying that if we have African Americans that graduated from an Ivy League school with a clean background and they came on the job, the propensity of them not acting out that way is going to be very lower? I don't know. I would tend to think that that's not the case. Mm-hmm. Well, we need more college graduates. Well, I was a high school dropout. And
exactly. Some of the best cops I ever worked with had no college degrees.
Exactly. I didn't have a college degree. I was a high school dropout.
It's a piece of paper. That's not going to dictate how you are.
Right. So it doesn't. So that's my point. So education doesn't define, truly who you are as a character when doing this type of police work.
And the flip side of that, brother, if you want to start demanding, and I know a lot of departments out there are demanding, putting, requirements for education, a bachelor's degree, you better start paying people more.
Yeah.
Because that's the flip side of that coin.
Yeah. And from what I experienced is that you're right. There is, don't get me wrong, having a college degree by no means. I have a couple degrees. Yes, exactly. That, and I'm taking you in the path that I'm all for that, but that doesn't define.
No.
Or you're not going to be able to tell whether or not police work is actually for you, right?
Yeah,
there's plenty of lawyers who are Ivy League grads. There's a lot of Harvard law grads that have done insider trading forever, And
I've always said, okay, ideally, you want somebody who's educated. It doesn't necessarily have to be formal, but formal, great, but has some fucking common sense too. And you run into this, somebody who's super smart, book smart, but don't have a lick of common sense. Yeah. I would rather get rid of the book smart, maybe have a little bit. Well, it's important book smart, but have some fucking common sense.
Yeah.
Because that's how you're going to survive.
You can't quantify. You're absolutely
That's how
right.
you're going to survive. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's nuts. And this is a horrible tragedy for the Nichols family. We all can agree with that. These guys need to be held accountable. I hope they are. As far as the ripple effect, brother, I think the Rodney King, which is a different incident, which happened out in California. Mm-hmm. That was a ripple effect that hit law enforcement for decades. Maybe it still is out in California. This, in my opinion, kind of just reignited that.
It did. It's definitely a scar in our profession, and it just. 2 years ago we went through something bad, right? So it hasn't been that long. I'm a true believer of this culture that I really preach for, because
I believe. Yeah,
I think I said this in the past. Look, I'm from Los Angeles. You're from Arizona, right? From Phoenix, around it. So guys like you and I are really familiar with, especially in law enforcement, we're familiar with major agencies in major cities. All these incidents, if you really put it on the scope, right, and go macro, right? Think about it. You've never heard of Kenosha before Kenosha.
Yeah.
You've never heard of Ferguson
before Ferguson. Yeah.
You've never heard of Minneapolis. Granted, you know where the city is.
Exactly.
But Minneapolis is not even with this, Minneapolis is not a place you go visit. Like, you'd rather go to Vegas, Phoenix, or LA or Minneapolis. Not really. The point I'm trying to, and then here we are with even Atlanta, the incident in Atlanta in the parking lot with the taser.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta's a huge city. But my point is that you never hear anything about those police agencies unless something completely, extremely way out of the norm happens, just like this case in Memphis, right? So what does that tell you? What that tells you is that out of 1,800, and don't quote me on the number, but 1,800 police agencies throughout the United States, there's these little pockets of agencies that have a certain culture of how to do police work, right? And it takes a chief, right? Someone from a big agency that is about integrity, that is about honesty, that is about, you know what, we're not cutting corners, we're not lowering standards. And by the way, the police academy I went to is probably one of the best, not just in the nation, in the world. Yeah. And so, you know what? It takes an individual like that to come in and say, you know what? That's not the way you do police work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I really feel. Now, of course, God forbid, with the grace of God, nothing happens to another person in some other smaller agency. But you know what? We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And this is a prime example of culture.
Yeah. And I love the how you frame that, brother, because the message I got from that, beautifully said, by the way, is the majority of officers out there, you and I have this discussion before, are doing a good job. The vast majority of cops out there, first responders, are good people just trying to put food on their table, raise their families, do a good job, serve their communities. but all it takes is that very, very, very small percentage of cops to make everybody look bad.
Yeah.
Make everybody look bad. I mean, there's what, 1 million cops, 800,000, 900,000 municipal cops in this country. You can't tell me that every cop out there, municipal cop or feds and state, all combined, think the same way. You know, you can't convince me because the stats don't. I mean, how many interactions cops have on a daily basis?
Absolutely.
Thousands.
An agency of 8,000 plus.
And I should have said this when we were talking about Memphis. I'm not trying to condemn the whole PD. I think probably the majority of cops in Memphis are trying to do a good job. It's just the actions of a few, and that's the nature of this beast, brother. The nature of law enforcement. You know that. The actions of a few, because it doesn't matter if I'm in Phoenix, you're in LA, Denver, or whatever. People see a uniform and say, yeah, you're one of them. You know, I saw what happened. All they see is a uniform and a badge and a star, and they lump you in with all the other bad cops we've seen over the years.
No one wants to talk about when I was barely off probation out of the academy, and I had a 19-year-old UCLA student in a bathroom with a knife in her stomach, getting ready to kill herself. And it was my partner and I who basically told her to drop the knife, open up the door, and I sat there for 2 hours after she hugged me and got all emotional to really get to know her and save her life. Yeah. But no one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear that
because it doesn't sell, bud.
That's right.
Sell. Do you think, in your expert opinion, brother? I mean, do you think now this has happened, and it's just begun because we still have the trial and all kinds of other things coming up? Do you think that the wake of this is going to be more officers getting trained to not go hands-on? And we have to go hands-on at something, but I can see some sort of politician out there saying, never grab a person, that you're going to put. I mean, I mean, maybe that's too extreme, but do you think there's going to be some ripple effect to this? There has to be. All right, we got to come up with alternatives. I mean,
I don't think we necessarily need to change policy as it relates to affecting an arrest. To your point, the word you just said, extreme. I think this is so extreme and so disgusting to watch, right? That no average patrol officer barely out of the academy can sit there and say to themselves, you know what, I just don't see handcuffing a suspect and having my partner just go to town on him.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So because it is so far remote from the average application of force, there's this analysis what we use is substantial deviation, right? So every time you apply force, you have substantial deviation from department policy and procedure. And that formula is along the lines of there's real time, there's policy, and then there is the fluidity, the motion, right? Because everything is moving, right? You can go from one location to another. And so it's constantly moving as you're applying force or not applying force, or when do you apply force, when you stop applying force. And so when you take that formula and you look into substantial deviation, which is the first thing I think about, substantial deviation, department policy and procedure without justification. Look, if you're going to substantially deviate, I suppose not just my department, but the majority of departments are saying, you know what, we're okay with that. But guess what? You need to justify why.
Exactly. Justify, articulate.
Right. So justification, articulation as it relates to application of force, whether it's a firm grip, takedown, body weight, taser, any less lethal, 40, OC spray, you name it, right? Whatever that application of force is you have to tell yourself, okay, there's probably some really good reasons why I deviate, and here's the reason, Sarge, right? But when you start looking into that and focusing right on this particular incident, there's just no explanation.
No, there's no explanation.
There's nothing that you can say.
So it's indefensible.
Come close to justifying your actions when you apply force.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So to me, as we look in the future, maybe in Memphis you might be hesitant, but no. I mean, look, you and I both know violent crimes are just off the roof right now. I just saw an incident of they're talking about kids and violence. It's just ridiculous. There was this kid that was getting beat up in a school bus. I mean,
it's just, and I agree with you, brother. I just hope that nothing drastic comes down to pike. I mean, you see it out in California. I think a sheriff out there got rid of the thin blue line, succumbing to public outcry. over
Yeah.
a thin
Yeah.
blue line. So I think in some cases, and I hope you're right in terms of what we just talked about, I hope people out there use some common sense and
Yeah.
don't go to the extreme, trying to appease a block, maybe a voting block.
Yeah.
And I hope we stick to common sense and Granby Connor and all this other stuff that's out there regulating use of force.
Absolutely. And before I forget, just so we're clear, when we're talking about this incident, yes, there's nothing that we should be discussing about reform and training. You're stating two obvious issues, right, that need to be done.
Yeah.
I would, as a matter of fact, you do need to train. I just want to make that very, very clear
Well,
that
yeah.
we don't get enough training, which
Yeah.
is one of the reasons why I joined with Scott over at
Yeah.
Savage Training Group, and he does a great job in telling a lot of these young officers that you need more training. I mean, our post, right, our certification in the state of California, they don't give you training because they want to make sure that you're actually going out there doing legal stops and making sure that you're going to be safe and come home, right? They just do it because they just have to do it, and let's get this done to certify you and continue the certification.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking the institute or the organization, but I don't think that we do enough training as it relates to, like in this incident, as it relates to traffic stops. No, granted, there's a lot to learn from this, but I just want to make sure that we understand that we do lack a lot of training in general.
But I like what you said, because, when you said this particular incident in Memphis, this horrible tragedy, nobody is training cops in whatever academy to beat the hell out of somebody when they're handcuffed.
Yes.
Or hey, we need a taser over here. Let's run this through the scenario by, okay, Marlon's on the ground. He's got 5 cops surrounding him. Okay, where's the taser? We're going to tase him when he's,
and don't forget to OC spray everybody too.
That you make an excellent point, though. I mean, this particular incident is not a training mishap. It is a cultural failure within an organization. So I like that. And I agree with you. There's always room for more training. But I can tell you, you know this, cops are trained. We need more, but we're highly trained. And that's the thing that people don't realize. It's like, I think there's a mindset out there with some people, brother, is that we get out of the academy, oh, here's your gun and your badge. There you go. That's not the case.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to use of force. I'm not talking about this Memphis thing. I'm talking about in general use of force. Firearms driving. Why? Because they're high liability.
Yes.
You know that.
There was, I was watching a show the other day. I forgot it was a military. I think it was a SEAL team member. I forgot he was one of those specials in the military that specifically said, look, before we even decide to actually deploy on a real life situation, we have trained for 6 months every single day.
On every possible angle of that mission. And then if plan A goes to shit, what do? We got to have some contingencies, right?
Right. Exactly. And then you guys like me and you, where, you know what, I haven't been in the game I've been in this business for 25 years almost, right? But I haven't gone to training in tactical de-escalations or, how to handle a non-barricaded suspect and stuff like that. Because there's always room to learn, whether you have 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25, things completely change. Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying, that we need to consistently keep training and know what you need to do.
Well, as we wrap up, brother, you mentioned Savage Training Group, Scott Savage, good friend of mine. He's a friend of yours. You're doing good. I see your hat on right now. Tell us about what you're doing with Savage Training Group.
So Scott and I met because he felt that the training as it relates to internal affairs, investigations, number one, he doesn't have, and I echoed with, it's just an untapped subject, as you know. So discipline is not something, well, number one, it's not sexy. It's not really sexy. Well, I try to make it sexy where I get up there and say, hey, we're
Marlon Marrache.
Because the last thing a police officer wants is to hear from my, oh, do you exactly. So what we decided to is he brought me on board, hired me, and we came up with a curriculum. We actually have a 2-day curriculum where the first day it's going to be all about internal affairs. Hey, I'm going to teach you. And by the way, yeah, which what I love a lot about him and makes a lot of sense is it's not death by PowerPoint whatsoever. And I'm not going to lecture you. We're actually going to teach either brand new supervisors, right? Sergeants and detectives, supervisors, or corporals or FTOs that are on the list to get promoted to sergeants to teach you how to do an intake, to teach you how to do an IA. Someone walks in the front desk and says, hey, there's this guy named Fitz, that at the coffee shop said this, and that. Or I was at 7-Eleven and I saw 2 cops get out and pretty much grab someone and throw them up against the wall. And, what is that all about? Right. Yeah. So you start, that's the kind of training you're going to get where I'm going to show you exactly what misconduct is, even if it is misconduct. Right. Yeah. And then go from there, how to initiate a complaint, how to investigate it. No stone goes unturned. He's heard me say that in the past. And a lot of small agencies, what we realized that we're doing with Scott is that a lot of small agencies don't have that resources like we do in our big agencies.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't.
And so we can also teach you in the class how to go through the adjudication process. In other words, the chief or the captain's going to say, hey, Fitz, you know what? All right, you did this investigation. So tell me, is it going to be unfounded or is it going to be sustained? And give me the reasons why. So that's day one, because there is Peace Officers Bill of Rights, because there is a Senate bill that is affecting your decertification process in the state of California. We're jumping right into day 2 and teaching all about officer-involved shooting protocols, because there is representation that the accused employee or the shooting officer and the recipient witnesses need. And so we developed this 2-day course. It got post-certified. So, brother,
I was going to say, post-certified, brother.
Man. Yeah, we're ready to go.
That is awesome, man. So proud of you, brother. You're rocking it. You are one smart guy, and I love having you on the show. If people want to find you, Marlon, pick your brain, reach out to you, where can they find you?
Let's go LinkedIn. That's the
Let's
best,
go LinkedIn, baby.
LinkedIn, send me in there. Marlon, Marlon Marrache.
Marrache.
Didn't you say I was like a John Wick?
Dude, when I first met, for the listener out there, I first met Marlon. I was like, damn, this guy's badass. And I was like, he reminds me of like a John Wick character. Marlon Marrache.
That's me, brother. Marrache is the last name. And you can most definitely send me an email at mmarrache@policediscipline.com.
Everything's going to be linked up,
man.
Everything's going to be, I love spending time with you, brother. Everything's going to be linked up in the show notes, brother. You take care. God bless. And I'll let you know when I push this out.
Perfect. Much love, Fitz.
Thank you, brother.